Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second session for our first day of Law of the Land, Sea and U, charting a sustainable future for all. I am your moderator, the senior Barnett, and I'm the director of the Northern Valley Law School Legal Aid Clinic. Now, we are this week looking at the theme of Law of the Land, Sea and U, charting a sustainable future for all, because of what has been happening in the region. Climate change is a matter that has been affecting all of us. And so the matter of sustainability is a live issue. For persons, climate change sounds something that's very scientific, and we don't quite understand what it means. So hopefully you are able to join us in our first session where we're taking through the impact of climate change. And if you missed it, feel free to join us on that channel and check out that stream that was broadcast earlier this morning. Now we are moving into looking at the matter of sustainable farming. And so for that reason, we are turning our attention to the matter of farming and sustainable farming in a changing world. And so I'm going to invite our year two student to introduce our speaker.
Good afternoon. Our speaker this afternoon is Mr. Joel Pryce. He is a graduate of the College of Agriculture Science and Technology with a first degree in environmental science. Mr. Pryce has extensive training in the field of agriculture and has served rather in capacities such as Agricultural Extension Officer and Land Husbandry Officer for almost 20 years. He has vast experience and knowledge and has aided the parish of St. Andrew in achieving increased productions and productivity over the years. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Joel Pryce.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. So as mentioned before, my name is Joel Pryce, Agricultural Land Management Officer for Parish of Kingston and St. Andrew. And today we're going to be looking at sustainable farming in a changing world. Right, so for centuries, humanity has relied heavily on farming approaches that primarily focused on immediate yields, These approaches undoubtedly cater to the ever-growing global food security demands. This process, however, often overlook the long-term effect of such approaches on our planet's health and sustainability. Maintaining a balance between our immediate needs and the needs of the future generations is paramount to sustainability. Sustainable farming practices prioritize the health of our soil organisms, the environment in general, as well as ensuring that farming remains viable and prosperous in the long term. When we embrace sustainable farming practices, we're not just focusing on presenting present food requirements, but instead we are looking at laying down a robust foundation for the generation to come. So as the climate changes and the world population increases, the quality and the sustainability of our food supply must be safeguarded. So all nations are experiencing their own share of challenges producing food. Jamaica is no different. According to the Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education Program, the goal of sustainable agriculture is to meet society's food and textile needs in the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. So let's look at some of the benefits of sustainable farming practices. So the first one we're going to be looking at is preserving soil health. And this includes sustainable farming practices such as crop rotation, cover crops, etc. Promoting biodiversity, and these practices create an harmonious environment where various crops and livestock can thrive. Securing future food supply. With an ever-increasing global population, securing our food supply for future generation is crucial. Sustainable farming system focuses on long-term productivity rather than just the immediate gains. Supporting farmer livelihoods. Sustainable practices often resulting in reduced input costs and better farm gate prices. Combating climate change. Sustainable farms play a pivotal role in carbon sequestration, reducing greenhouse gas emission, and countering the adverse effects of climate change. Now we're going to look at some of the areas in which we can actually apply to our day-to-day operations to ensure that we are achieving sustainability. So the first one that we're going to be looking at is crop rotation and diversification. This practice involves growing different types of crops in a sequence on the same piece of land. What this does is it breaks the cycle of the pest. As you know, how pests operate. So they will feed on a buffer. So once they like a particular crop, they will continue to feed on it once it is supplied to them. So when you change your crop cycle, what you're doing is actually breaking the cycle and produce at speed. It increases soil moisture. So once you rotate the crop, then it allows the soil itself to be able to benefit from the shifting of the crops. So no one crop will be able to deplete the nutrients in the soil. So it improves the soil fertility in the sequence. And of course, it reduces depletion of the soil nutrients itself. So when you allow one crop to continue to grow on the same piece of land, then that crop will utilize the set of nutrients that it needs to come to maturity. So if you allow that one crop to continue to grow there, then over time it will deplete all of those nutrients. So crop rotation will help to manage the soil nutrients in this sense. Then there's also organic farming. If we are to be sustainable farmers, then we need to practice some amount of organic farming as well. So instead of relying on synthetic fertilizers, then we also incorporate natural manures and so forth. So this prioritizes natural methods over synthetic inputs. It is a holistic approach that emphasizes soil health, biodiversity, and ecological balance. Then there is the minimum tillage, and especially in Jamaica and the hillsides that we do, that a lot of farming takes place. And here in St. Andrew, most of the farmers, they farm in the hills and very steep lands. So minimum tillage is important, is an important practice to apply because you want to maintain your topsoil. So when the more you till the soil, is the more it becomes vulnerable to move. So when you practice minimum tillage, it means that you just till in the areas that you use, you're not just tilling in general. So you're reducing the amount of disturbance that you create on the soil as to minimize erosion. It helps, it allows the crop residue to have nutrients to the soil, organic nutrients that is. Zero tillage, similarly, is one in which you do no plowing. You do more like direct planting instead of plowing your land for planting. Then there is agroforestry. And with agroforestry, what you're doing is bringing together agriculture, livestock production, and forestry. So agroforestry is a multifunctional system where trees and shrubs are grown around and are among crops or pasture. It ensures that farming does not contribute to deforestation, but instead play a part in forest conservation. And back in the days, we would have lost a lot of our forest covers, a lot of our land covers due to slash and burn, where persons would just remove trees arbitrarily for the sake of agriculture. And we are saying that for us to be sustainable, we need to look at incorporating agroforestry, that is plant growing of trees in along with growing our crops. So it can't be one or the other. We need to have a symbiotic relationship. Overcropping is another important practice that needs to be applied if we are to be sustainable. Overcropping is just growing specific crops, and in some cases, these crops are not intended for harvesting, but more for protecting the soil. It improves the soil health and fertility and manages the pests. So it reduces erosion in that because it covers the soil, then the soil is protected from, raindrops, from just the hostile environment. It improves the soil health and fertility because once the soil is kept covered, then it means that more biological activities is allowed to take place. It promotes water infiltration in that it reduces the speed at which water runs off and allow for time for the water to infiltrate in the soil. It enhances water availability. And in this sense, what happens is that because it covers the soil, then it keeps the moisture in the soil for longer. And of course, it suppresses weed growth. So once the soil is covered, and it can be covered with crops like pumpkins, cucumbers, sweet potatoes, just to name a few. And there is biological pest control. This utilizes natural systems of predators and organisms to control pests. This approach reduces the dependency on chemical pesticides. And for example, there's the ladybug beetle that combats aphid population in vegetable gardens. And if you can see, we have a lot of insects, and these are farmers' friends. So you might see these around and you might think that these are harmful, but it is important to promote, the population of the beneficial insects. So what these are natural enemies to the pest that affects your crops. So these don't affect your crops, but they protect your crops. There are also the parasites that feeds on some of the pests, like your caterpillars, your worms. For example, your parasitic wasp. What they do is that they live on these pests, so they feed on these pests. So they reduce the population of these pests that affects the crop. So the more you use chemicals, chemical-based synthetic chemicals in your farming, is the more threat you pose for these natural enemies. So when you practice like organic farming, then you promote the increase of these natural enemies. And there is agrobiodiversity. And this emphasizes the importance of genetic variety in plants and animals to ensure resilience against pests and climate change. So what this does really is that instead of relying on one strain of, say, a crop, for example, there are multiple varieties. So should there be a disease outbreak that might wipe out one of the varieties or something, you still have other varieties that might not necessarily be susceptible to these pests and diseases. So it gives the crop a fighting chance. Then there is aquaponics. So there are other farming techniques that you can employ, and especially during 2024, most of the year was pure rain. So very little could have been done out in the field. So persons with systems like hydroponics, greenhouse, they were able to take advantage of growing crops in a protected environment. And aquaponics is just one of those. So it's a sustainable system that combines conventional aquaculture with hydroponics. When we speak about aquaculture, we're talking about the cultivation of fish in fresh water. When we talk about hydroponics, it's growing of crops in water. So with this, fish and plants grow together in one integrated environment. And if you can look at this system here, you'll see how it works. So there's a tank where the fish grows. There is a section where the plant grows, and then there's another tank where the clean water is. So the fish is fed in the first tank. You can look at step number 1, and then the waste from the fish is pumped. It's pumped and the plant, the beneficial bacteria converts the ammonia and the nitrites from the waste from the fish into nitrates. Once it is converted into nitrates, now it's in a usable form for the plant itself. So the plant utilizes this, and then the water becomes clean and is pumped to the other tank, and then the water is pumped back to the tank where the fish are. And that's how the aquaponic works. So it's a symbiotic relationship between the plants and the fish. Water management has to be on the forefront of any sustainable agricultural endeavors. So efficient water use and storage practices ensure water conservation and optimal usage. The broader perspective of agriculture water management delves into ensuring that water resources are used in a manner that is sustainable for both the environment and for future generations. So by addressing water scarcity and improving water quality, forage crop, we pave the way for both healthier crops and a healthier ecosystem. So, and some examples are, implementing drip systems, looking at even mulching, looking at water harvesting. And for those who don't know what a drip system is, it's just some tubes that supply water to the plant directly at the plant root, where all the water that is used is utilized by the plants based on the amount that is being released to the plants each time. Water harvesting is important, especially for areas that are generally dry. We promote the idea of even doing ponds. So in areas where we know we don't have irrigation water, then it is good to construct ponds where you can store water for when the drought period comes and you have water to supply to your plants. Then there is waste recycling and composting. This is just turning organic waste into valuable compost. And this process enriches the soil, reduces the need for chemical fertilizers, and minimizes waste. And this is something that can be done in every home. So whatever scrap from your kitchen, plant waste that can be utilized. Instead of putting them out in the garbage bin, you can use them to generate valuable nutrients for your soil. Then there is polyculture. And this is growing multiple crops in the same space simultaneously. And this method maximizes land use, especially areas where we have very small spaces. We want to utilize every square inch of land that we have. So polyculture is something that should be considered in cases like that. So it reduces pest issues. It promotes a balanced ecosystem. An example of this is growing beans, corns, and squash together. So while the beans fix nitrogen in the soil, the corn provides a structure for the beans to grow on. And the squash itself acts as a soil cover. And this will help to reduce the weeds, and we went through cover cropping before. Then there are other techniques that one can employ to ensure that we are operating in a sustainable manner. So we operate on a piece of land. We want to ensure that we maintain our topsoil. So we have to put methods in place to ensure that we don't lose our topsoil. And there are a number of techniques that can be employed to ensure that we are doing just that. So there's the establishment of barriers. It's like there's the live vegetative barriers to include pineapple, vetiver, sugarcane, and fibergrass. And then there's the dead barriers where you can utilize poles, tree trunk, bamboos, whatever it is that you can find. The pineapple barriers is just simply the planting of pineapple suckers along the contour. When we speak about contour, we're talking about points of equal elevation along your slope. And we have a lot of slopes in Jamaica, especially here in St. Andrew. So these techniques are very important for us to employ. So what happened with these suckers is that we plant them in a triangular format, along the contour that is, the pineapples are utilized for this purpose in that it has very strong fibrous roots that holds the soil particles together. They break the flow of water washing down the slope. So because it breaks the flow of the water, it allows the water time to infiltrate. And as a result, it reduces the ability for the water to scour the land, to remove the topsoil. We spoke about the triangular format, so you can see it's more like it's like a two-row thing. So the pineapples are planted, in a triangular format. So when the water comes, it hits the first plant. That plant splits the water into two, and then it hits the plant below it, and it further splits it in two, allowing it, slowing it down significantly. And the bamboo barriers or pole barriers can be constructed as is shown in the photo here. Then there's the vetiver grass barrier. And if you look at this picture, you can see the root system of the vetiver grass. You realize that it's very strong, it's very fibrous, it goes very deep, it's very effective in holding the soil particles together. So this is something that can be planted on your hillsides to mitigate against soil erosion. And there are other techniques like the hillside ditch that can be constructed, which is simply a reverse slope that is created along the contour again. And you'll note that all of the barriers that we establish or construct will be done along the contour. Once it is done along the contour, then it means that it has a better chance of remaining, as opposed to if you just place your barriers without factoring the contour, then it will be easily moved by the water. So again, it breaks the flow of the water rushing down the slope. It helps to retain soil moisture and soil nutrients, and it reduces erosion. Ultimately, that is the goal, to reduce erosion. And this is what it looks like. Then there is the edge drain. So once you are going to do some farming on a piece of land, it is important that you do what we call land ecosystem analysis. So you really look at what is on the land, look at the state of the land, and look at what needs to be done to the land. So you don't just go in and start to plant. If it's on a slope, you want to establish some of these barriers. You want to establish an edge drain so that when there is a lot of rain, the edge drain will remove excess water from your plot. So it collects the water, entering the plot, it holds the water and allows time for it to infiltrate. It mitigates scoring of the topsoil and protects the crop from damages. And that's an example of what the edge drain would look like. And there are individual basins that can be constructed as well. And the individual basin is really constructed in the form of a basin, utilizing a reverse slope, just the same. A plant is planted in the center of this basin, hence the name individual basin. Again, it retains soil moisture and nutrients. It allows for ease in placement of your fertilizers. Because if you're on a hillside and you just apply your fertilizers, the fertilizer, one shower rain can just come and remove everything you plant. So constructing your individual basin will help to reduce these events. And this is what the individual basin would look like. So for the coffee on the right-hand side, you realize that the coffee you construct a smaller basin as opposed to your fruit trees on the right hand, on the left. Then there is contour planting. The practice of tilling the slope land along the lines of consistent elevation. So it conserves rainwater and reduces soil losses from surface erosion. This is achieved by means of furrows, crop rows across slopes, all of which act as reservoirs to catch and retain rainwater. And again, it increases infiltration and more uniform distribution of the water. That is what the contour planting look like. And there's a tool for establishing your contour. So there's a tool called the A-frame that you use, and that will determine where the contour points are. So you can actually plot the contour points, so you know exactly where to place your barriers and where to plant your crops. And finally, there is climate smart agriculture. So for us to be sustainable, we have to be practicing climate smart agriculture. Because we see what is happening with climate change. Climate change is real. Climate change is and has been threatening our food security for a number of years now. And for us to be sustainable, we have to practice climate smart agriculture. So in practicing climate smart agriculture, we have to look at how we're going to sustainably increase our productivity and our income. So it's not just increasing production, it's not just increasing our income, but it's doing it in a sustainable way. And if we practice the techniques that were outlined earlier on, then we'll be on a path to sustainability, and then we'll be able to increase our productivity in a sustainable way. Then there is strengthening your resilience to climate change and durability. So once we employ the techniques that was outlined, then we'll find ourselves in a position where we become more resilient, and we can be better able to adapt to climate change or to mitigate the effects of climate change. And we have to reduce agricultural contribution to climate change. So if we utilize more composting, practice some amount of organic farming, construct our barriers, establish our barriers, then we realize that we'll be doing our part in terms of minimizing the effects of climate change, hence reducing agricultural effect on climate change. And of course, slash and burn, we spoke about that. So we don't want to be doing slash and burn. We don't want to be cutting down trees. We want to be planting more trees. We want to be incorporating trees into our production so that the trees can help with carbon sequestration. So we'll be helping the process as opposed to contributing to climate change. So that is my presentation. Sure.
Right. So we are going to give persons in the audience, and if you are joining us on live stream and you want to type in your questions, you can go ahead and do so.
Mr. Pryce, you mentioned you mentioned colleague. Right. And you gave us an example, three crops that could be planted together. Is there any other guide as to what plants we could actually plant together? Because I'm sure in order to balance the role that each plant plays, it's not just any arbitrary crop that you would plant. So is there a guide? Is there somewhere we could access that information as to the type of plants? For example, somebody doing backyard farming, the type of plants that we could actually plant together. And secondly, so that's the first question. The second one is, for effective, you mentioned natural pest control methods. But that sounds to me as if it will take some period of time to encourage certain insects and other things to be a part of your garden. And it sounds like you're going to lose your crop before that happens. So is there a balance between the artificial not fertilizers, pest control methods and these natural methods that we could employ, or we'll just have to do one or the other? So those are my two questions.
So thank you very much for those questions. That's a very good question. So to answer the first question, yes, you are correct. So you can't just plant any crop together. For one, you want to ensure that you're not planting crops of the same family together. Why? Because in most cases, the same pests affect crops in the same family. Plus, the crops in the family, they utilize the same nutrients in a lot of cases. So if you plant them together, then they will be competing for nutrients. So you want to plant crops that complement each other. For example, there are leguminous crops, they would fix nitrogen in the soil. So they would help to actually ensure that nitrogen is available. So you want to incorporate that with other crops. So like corn is a heavy feeder. So if you're planting corn, you want to ensure that you're also planting legumes as well, because that will replenish some of the nutrients that the corn is utilizing. So yes, and the other question you asked, so right, in terms of the natural enemies. So we're not saying that you should rely just on the natural enemies. We're saying that you should use an integrated approach. So with the techniques that were outlined, when you utilize those techniques coupled with promoting the natural enemies, then your reliance on chemical, the synthetic chemical will reduce significantly. Because if you just rely on synthetic chemicals, then you will be getting rid of these natural enemies. Then it means that you will have to be relying more. So each time you'll have to be relying more on the chemical, on the synthetic chemicals. And we are seeing that we are seeing a lot of cases where persons would have overused chemical fertilizers and synthetic pesticides. And it reaches a point now where there are pests that cannot be controlled with the pesticides that are here. No, like for example, the beet worm. Right. So if persons were mindful from a long time ago, if persons were mindful of the fact that these pests would develop resistance to these chemicals, and if they knew about, the integrated approach that they could, promote the natural enemies and so forth, then they wouldn't have to be relying on so much chemical fertilizers and synthetic chemicals.
Is there anywhere that we could get this information? I mean, we hear it from the presentation, but if we wanted to transfer some of this information, some of this learning into our own private spaces, is there anywhere that we can actually access the information?
Right. So if you go on our Instagram page, if you go on RADA's YouTube page, you would see a number of videos that would outline a lot of these. I would share there are a lot of these information you can get.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, so we do have a question. So we do have a question from online, and the question is, well, first they said, thank you for a very informative presentation. And said, I wanted to inquire, how do we contain vectors such as mosquitoes in the water harvesting in the black drum with water runoff from gutters around the roof?
Okay, so you can put mesh around the, thank you very much for that question again. But you can always cover your containers with mesh. So that would separate that would prevent the mosquitoes from breeding inside of your water. And there's also oil that you can pour inside on top that would prevent the mosquitoes from breeding inside the water.
Thank you for that. Okay, so the matter of aquaponics, right, is very, very interesting, and it's something that I wish we could get more information on. So can you just tell us a little bit what exactly would RADA help with? So let us say you had a person, a fledgling farmer. Could they reach out to RADA, and what are some of the things that your organization is prepared to do?
Okay, so as you know, the role of RADA is to provide technical service to farmers, but not just farmers, prospective farmers as well. So those who want to get into farming, they can always reach out to the RADA office. There is an extension officer for each extension areas in each parish. So all parishes are covered. So there are extension officers for each farm or anybody who wants to get into farming. So they can just reach out to the RADA office that is closest to them. There's an officer that can come out in the field, can look at what you have, can advise you accordingly.
All right, thank you. So RADA is willing and able to help. And so we really want to thank you very much for having been here. And so I'm going to officially invite our students to make a presentation.
Yes. All right, so on behalf of the Legal Aid Clinic and the students of Norman Manley here physically present and those online, we would like to thank you for taking the time to come here and for speaking to us on sustainable farming methods and even approaches that we on an individual level can take. So it doesn't have to be on a national level. It can start from just our efforts. And so we thank you for also telling us that RADA is open, not just to farmers, but also to us who want to make an effort to help our environment. So, Mr. Pryce, thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge with us today.